So let's get rid of start. So it's 2:06. This is the joint meeting of the West Turlock Subbasin GSA Technical Advisory Committee and the East Turlock Subbasin GSA Technical Advisory Committee. It's a regular meeting. The West Turlock folks are meeting here in the TID offices in Turlock, and we have the East Turlock folks joining us from the Cortez Bowl in Cortez. So welcome everybody. I would call the West Turlock to order, but we only have 5 members right now, and we need 7 to make a quorum. So we'll hold off on that. But Sarah, would you like to call the East Turlock folks to order?
I would. I will call the East Turlock TAC to order at 2:07, and in attendance we have Lacey from Merced County, Christy from Stanislaus, Dennis from Belico Cortez, and myself from Eastside Water District. And then also in the room is Mike Pizza, General Manager of ETS GSA.
Okay, fantastic. And we have a number of people online. They're welcome to identify themselves and say hi if they want to, but otherwise we can move forward. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Liz Elliott with Todd Groundwater. Nice to see you all.
Hello, I'm Arden Wells with Todd Groundwater.
Hello, I'm Brent Johnson with Todd Groundwater.
Hi there, Caitlin Bursey, Counsel for ETS GSA.
Okay, looks like we have Len Mason I worked with Mike Pizza, and then we have Michelle from Keys Community Services District. So welcome everybody. First item on the agenda is public participation. This is the time set aside for members of the public to directly address the technical advisory committees on any item of interest that has been the subject matter jurisdiction of the technical advisory committees. You can talk about general items of interest now, or if you have last week speak about an agenda item, you can wait till that item is called. We can talk about it now. So with that, do we have any public participation? Okay, hearing none. And I was kind of remiss not to introduce who's here in the room in TID offices. Maybe just some quick introductions here for those. Yeah, come on in. Just an introductions. So who's here in the TID offices? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Joshua Casas from City of Ceres.
Welcome.
Michael Clipper, TID.
Debbie Montalbano with the TID.
Juan Ochoa, City of Modesto.
Mike Ficklock, City of Waterford.
Cynthia Caldera, TID.
And Michael Cook, TID.
Jennifer Land, TID.
Okay. So moving on to item number 4, meeting minutes, adopting the minutes of the January 9th regular joint meeting of the West Turlock and East Turlock Technical Advisory Committees. Obviously, West Turlock, we can't vote on that. We're up to 6 now. So that's good. We need 7 to vote. So Sarah, would you like to go ahead and minutes from January 9th?
Yes. So if I could get a motion to approve the minutes from January 9th of our regular joint meeting, that would be great. Approve the minutes. Dennis, thank you. Second. Christy, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved for East Turlock.
Thank you so much. So moving on to item number 5, this is a budget update, overview of revenues and expenses for the West Turlock, East Turlock Subbasin GSA, as well as the overall basin account. So I'll hand over to Michael Clipper, the treasurer.
Okay. I'm prepping the financials, or not, but the presentation for Thursday. But as of December 31st, for the West Turlock account, we had $1,176,659.83. For the basin, we had $840,851.54. Any questions?
That's good. Any questions for Michael? Hearing none. Sarah, do you have a budget update for East Turlock?
I do. I have East Turlock account balance as of the end of January at $275,387.47.
Good. Any other questions about the budget for East or West? Okay, hearing none. Moving on to one of our main events here, item number 6, groundwater sustainability plan determination. and recommended actions to address deficiencies. So reviewing what DWR said in their determination, dealing with our deficiencies and figuring out how to move forward. So I'll turn over to Debbie and Liz.
Hey, so on January 18th, the Department of Water Resources determined that the Turlock Subbasin GSP is incomplete and identified two specific inadequacies that need to be addressed. We have been given 180 days to address those deficiencies and revise the GSP and resubmit it to DWR for consideration by July 16th. And so DWR has that determination letter was circulated to the technical advisory committees, the GSAs, as well as the website. So it's available for the public as well. Since that time, as a plan manager, I've been working with the technical advisory committee chair on the west side, as well as Sarah and Mike Tietze on the eastern side, and the technical consultants that we have on staff, so Todd Groundwater and Woodard and Kern, as well as Department of Water Resources, to understand the determination letter and to develop an approach to how to address the deficiencies and comply with the resubmittal process by July. And so the Department of Water Resources has been very clear that they're wanting to work with us in this process and help to answer questions, and that they want us to be very focused in our revisions to the GSP and submit and only revise those sections that address the deficiencies, and then resubmit 2 copies, one redlined so they can see what changes were made, and then a final version as well. And then they will be analyzing if those revisions address the deficiencies or not. They don't want other revisions to the GSP because that forces them to reassess those sections or those issues that they had already kind of worked through. And so that's one very clear thing that they've indicated as we've kind of worked through this process. Liz is here to walk us through the determination and the deficiencies and the approach that is being recommended, as well as the schedule. It's a very short timeline. And so it's set up so that there's a lot of things happening at once. Everything's being done in parallel to kind of work through the process and get to the end as quickly as possible.
So Debbie, I got a question because I looked at Todd Groundwater's scope of work, and there's like 4 meetings with DWR. So are those going to be workshops that we're going to be working in parallel with them to kind of get the nod and say, okay, yes, we kind of, your approach or whatever you're providing it is acceptable, or what's?
So they can't guarantee that what we submit is going to get an approval, but what they will do is provide feedback and assistance in understanding if the staff, recommends certain things, that they'll suggest things, but there's going to be no guarantee. But those workshops with DWR are designed to, and Liz can talk a little more about it, but to get feedback on the different components and the analyses and our approach. We've already had one, which is an initial consultation with the DWR staff. And we've been working under the on-call services contract that we've had with Todd Groundwater, which was something that the tax have talked about already. It's like that was the approach. If we were in the situation, that could get us started instantly and working through, okay, what does it mean, and getting us moving forward. So that's how we've gotten a scope of work put together. And then the other thing that DWR has offered in this process is that we can give them a call. It's like, hey, this is what we're talking about. So there'll be those 4 kind of meetings that are identified in the scope. But then there can be other calls along the way to get clarification. It's like, hey, we're running into this. What do you think about that? Those types of things. And I've had some of those conversations with them already, trying to figure out, well, what is the process? How does this kind of revision process work? What are some of the requirements? Those types of things. So there's opportunity to get clarification. But again, there's no guarantees.
Oh, right. It's great to have some feedback or maybe some direction.
Exactly. And that's the intent. Yeah. Okay. So any other questions? If not, I'll turn it over to Liz, and then we can talk a little bit about process for because hopefully by then we'll have another person and we might be able to take action. If not, we'll figure that out. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Liz.
Hi, thanks, Debbie. Hello, everyone. Someone give me the thumbs up that you can hear me? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I am gonna try to keep this to 10 to 15 minutes. I just wanted to, as Debbie said, go through this determination letter that was received from DWR. So I'm gonna first try to summarize the major points in it, and then I am going to share my screen and discuss the schedule that we have proposed for making these revisions. So as Debbie said, we received an incomplete from DWR, which gives us 180 days to make revisions, with revisions due July 16th. There were 2 deficiencies that were identified in the letter from DWR. And each deficiency includes corrective actions from the state, things that they want us to do to correct it and revise the GSP. So I'll go through and I'll summarize these and summarize our kind of approach, and then talk about the schedule and the scope of work. So the first deficiency is that the GSP does not provide sufficient information to support the selection of chronic lowering of groundwater levels sustainable management criteria. And the corrective action that they provide in their letter is that they say the GSAs must provide more detailed explanation and justification regarding the selection for the sustainable management criteria for the chronic lowering of groundwater sustainability indicator. And the gist of this is that in the GSP, we established interim milestones for wells within ETS GSA, and also a handful of wells within West Turlock Subbasin GSA, whose water levels had been declining for years. And these IMs were set below the minimum thresholds. And it was a recognition that in the first 5 years, these are 2027 interim milestones, in the first 5 years of plan implementation, these groundwater levels would likely continue to decline as projects and management actions are developed and implemented. And it would take time to arrest the groundwater level declines and bring them back up. And what the state would like us to do is to analyze the effects of groundwater elevations going to these IMs. So the question for really this first corrective action is, what is the effect on beneficial uses and users of groundwater if the groundwater elevations go to the IMs? The first part, so this corrective action has 3 different parts. The first part, they're asking for a well impact analysis. They would like to know what is the impact on wells in the subbasin if groundwater elevations are lowered beneath the MT to the IM, the interim milestone. And so we will do that impact analysis. The second question is, once you've done that well impact analysis, how do you plan to mitigate the wells that have been impacted? And GWR would like the development of a well mitigation plan. And this well mitigation plan, they suggest using a guidance document that came out in April 2023. And it would need to address what types of wells are likely to be vulnerable or become dry, how many, where are they? And they also want to know, estimated costs and funding sources for developing the well mitigation plan. And this is something that we asked DWR directly about during our initial consultation meeting last week. The question of costs and funding sources is going to take time. It's going to take stakeholder input, and it's going to take time to develop. And we asked DWR, based on what we have seen been done in other subbasins, whether or not we had to have a completed well mitigation plan within the 180-day period, or whether we could have a start with a promise to finish. And they said it's okay to have a start with a promise to finish. And the reason for that is because the funding sources and estimated costs are going to take time to develop. So this well mitigation plan that's developed will have to have an implementation plan and a commitment to complete it. And they want to see this done soon, before 2027, so that so that this can be in place if wells go dry or are vulnerable by that date. And so the third part of this first corrective action is that the state wants us to look at lowering groundwater elevations to the IMs, will that have an effect on other sustainability indicators? In their letter, they specifically call out land subsidence and water quality. And during our meeting last week, we had a question for them about interconnected surface water. And they sort of implied that, yes, you need to also look at that. Does someone have a question? Sorry.
No, thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, it's okay. So this third part of this corrective action, we'll need to be looking at these other sustainability indicators to see whether lowering groundwater elevations to these IMs may have an effect on them. And so that is deficiency number one and corrective action number one. Corrective action number two states that the GSP does not include sufficient details of projects and management actions to mitigate overdraft in the subbasin or provide a feasible path to achieve sustainability. And the corrective action, they indicate that the GSA should revise the GSP to provide details of feasible projects and management actions that will be implemented to mitigate overdraft and that will raise groundwater levels from the interim milestones towards the minimum thresholds and measurable objectives to achieve sustainability. And there are two parts to this corrective action. The first part really is asking the GSAs to describe feasible, effective proposed projects and management actions that are commensurate with the level of understanding of groundwater conditions in the subbasin and provide sufficient details for DWR to be able to clearly evaluate how the projects and management actions will ensure achieving the sustainability goal. And so what they're looking for here is more information about the projects and management actions that we already have. They would like information on the sources, engineering, economics, financial feasibility, and schedule of implementation. And I think this is one theme to this part of the corrective action, which is sort of the heavy lift of this letter. This deficiency is the heavier of the two lifts, is that they want to see a commitment and a timeline for the projects and management actions. They make a point of saying in their letter that we had indicated that we would adaptively manage the subbasin. And in their letter, they clearly state, hey, what do you mean by that? You're already in overdraft. What are you waiting for? And so there's sort of a sense of urgency to the letter. And there was sort of a sense of immediacy that we got from them during our meeting last week. So they really want to see, they want to understand when these PMAs are going to be implemented, and they want to see a commitment to them so that they can understand that we have a plan to reach sustainability, to overcome the overdraft that we have in this subbasin.
Liz, we have a question.
Sure.
So Liz, this is Juan Ochoa from City Modesto. So is this plan going to require a programmatic EIR for these various projects that we're going to have to outline, or it doesn't have to go to that level?
It does not. The GSP revision does not require a programmatic EIR. It just requires a timeline of when these projects and management actions will be implemented. And in fact, the subbasin is actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie, but has completed a programmatic EIR so to make the implementation of projects a little bit quicker.
So yes, we did that under a grant that we had. And so that's in place, and it allows for, I think, the different projects to then tier off of that, and it'd be a little simpler and easier to implement the SQL process for specific projects. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to kind of add to what Liz said was that I think what I heard, and Sarah and Mike, chime in if you heard something different, but I think what I heard from DWR is that they're not opposed to adaptive management, but what they'd like to have is clear projects and management actions that would clearly demonstrate that will achieve sustainability and meet the interim milestones and the markers that we've established within the GSP, and then have additional projects and management actions to adaptively manage the unknowns. If it's drier conditions that we predicted based on the hydrology of what we see into the future, because we used past hydrology to project the future, and they're never the same, right? So that, I think that was their, so they like adaptive management. They like being able to have things to address, but they're kind of like, you're already in overdraft. We want to see that you have enough in place to move.
So do they want to see like recharge banking projects where you bank water during?
They don't tell you how to manage. That's up to the local entities and the GSAs to address, but we have to demonstrate that we can achieve what we say we're going to do under the GSP. Does that kind of in line with what you all heard?
I think what you said is 100% correct. Yeah. And so the second part of this second corrective action, they're asking us to evaluate the group of PMAs that we have in the GSP. And I think the question they're asking is, do you need more? And if you need more, what are they? And so our approach there is to dive into the GSP and to work with Woodard and Curran, who is the modeling sort of teammate of ours, who simulated the PMAs for the GSP, and see if our current collection of PMAs is enough or if we need more, and if there are new PMAs that haven't been simulated that the GSAs would like to incorporate, then those would need to be simulated using the model that was developed for the GSP. And so that is corrective action number 2. And again, as I said before, I believe that this corrective action is the heavier of the 2 lifts of the 2 corrective actions. But it is, and it's something that is going to, we're going to be working very closely with the GSAs over the next few months. So if you'd like, I can share my screen. We have developed a proposal, as you have seen in your agenda packet. Can you see the schedule?
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you very much.
Okay. So we have developed a proposal to make these revisions to the GSP. And it includes 7 tasks with an optional task that I haven't included here on the schedule. So I'll run through these tasks as shown on the schedule. This is sort of a conceptual schedule, and we're working with the GSAs to refine it a little bit for some of these tasks. So we have the project begin date being this Thursday, which is when the board meeting is, the West Turlock board. And so our first task is to develop an approach and methodology. We have already started this. We've developed an approach memorandum and for the GSAs. And we are, the point of this is to make clear what our intention is and what our proposed methodology is for addressing these deficiencies and for revising the GSP. And we'll be providing that to the GSAs for review so that we're all kind of on the same page before we really dig in. The second task is the well impacts analysis. This is in response to corrective action 1, as I said. Here we are going to be evaluating the vulnerability of all types of wells in the subbasin if groundwater elevations decline below the MT to the IM. So this will have several parts. First, we are going to kind of expand our database of wells. And we will do an analysis at the MT level. So for wells that have construction information where we know that either the total depth or the base of the screen, we will be looking at those depths in comparison to the MT groundwater elevation. Any well whose groundwater elevation at that point is beneath the base of the screen or the well, that's considered a potentially dry or vulnerable well. We'll be doing the same analysis at the IM groundwater elevation. And the difference between the number of wells that are vulnerable or dry at the MT and the IM is the impact of going below the MT. So that's our first step with the well impacts analysis. And then once we have a sense of how many and where these vulnerable or dry wells may be, then the next task 3, is to develop a well mitigation plan. And I talked a little bit about that before.
Hey, Liz?
Yeah.
Michael, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do we know how many of those wells are actually active or exist? Or, I guess that's my concern. We think there's 500 wells, but maybe only 100 are active, let's just say. So that will affect our impact.
Yeah, and that's a data gap that we're going to have because most of this information that we get is going to be from DWR's website, their online well completion report database. And so this will include well completion reports for all wells that have been constructed. And this is the problem, if we won't know which wells, if a domestic well was constructed 20 years ago, unless there's an abandonment record, which there are sometimes. But if there's not, then we have to assume that well is still operating. So this is going to be, these are going to be estimates. And I think, we did a cursory analysis in the GSP and we identified sort of areas of the subbasin that seem to be most vulnerable for this to happen. And so I think that from this analysis, we'll get estimates and we'll get kind of, we'll get ideas of regions of the subbasin that are most vulnerable and types of wells.
And we'll be able to kind of cross-check that with what actually happened. So say in our analysis, we assume a well would go dry, but actually we found out during that period when we reached the IMs actually did not go dry. It's kind of like calibrating a model. Is there a way to look at that, or do we just assume that we definitely go dry? I mean, because DWR has those kind of well reports you can do if a well goes dry.
Yeah, I think we'll absolutely, definitely, DWR has a dry well reporting system. I think that's what you were just talking about. So we'll definitely be using information from that to cross-check and to kind of try to ground truth as much as we can. Yeah. So the next task is task 4, the sustainability indicator analysis. This is the third part of the first corrective action. This is to address, what happens if you lower the groundwater elevation to the IM? Will it have an effect on other sustainability indicators? And this is where we're going to be looking at the potential effects on land subsidence, water quality, and interconnected surface water. Task 5 is the big one. It's the analysis of projects and management actions. This is where we are going to be digging in and, we're going to be evaluating the current PMAs that are in the GSP. We'll be refining the details of the PMAs that are provided in the GSP. And we'll be kind of reanalyzing and providing, more quantitative, more detailed information, timelines, commitments to these projects and management actions. Now, there's an optional task to this proposal that you can see in your packet that includes doing additional model simulations. So this task number 5 assumes that we're using the current GSP model with the current kind of group of projects and management actions. If the GSAs decide and we decide that we need to simulate additional projects and management actions that are not in the GSP, then that model is going to need to be rerun and resimulated, and that's where we're looking at that optional task to do that. Task 6 is actually revising the GSP. Now, one thing that we assumed and that we confirmed with DWR during last week is that this GSP, the revised GSP, does not require a formal public review process. So we don't need to have it out to the public for 90 days. We don't need to collect comments and respond to them, which makes it, more feasible to do this in the 6-month period that we have. So our assumptions for task 6 for revising the GSP are that we are going to provide one draft revised GSP to the GSAs, probably in mid-June, about a month before it's due. Provide the GSPs with a couple of weeks to review it, and then incorporate the edits and revisions and submit it by July 16th. And then our last task is project management and meetings, and we have several types of meetings. TAC planning group meetings, which are monthly. We have assumed attendance from February through July, so 6 meetings. Joint TAC meetings like this one, we've assumed 3 of them. And we've assumed that those would be kind of later in the process, May, June, and July, once we have, finished the analyses or some of the analyses and have results to show. And then, as we discussed before, we are also including meetings with DWR. We had our initial meeting with them last week, and we are assuming that we're going to have 3 more, 1 per month over the next few months. And the purpose of these meetings is to show them our methodology, to ask questions, and make sure that we are on the right track, and that we are we did ask them very specific technical questions last week, and they answered them. So it was a really helpful meeting. So I see these meetings as being pretty helpful. So so that's the schedule. Starting right away, it's we've got a lot of work to do, and one thing that we know we're going to be doing is for task 5 for the projects and management actions, we'd like to work with the GSAs soon over the next week to kind of come up with a more refined schedule in terms of the information that we, and especially Woodard and Kern, the modeling team, will need for their analysis. So
where does the option fall in?
So Liz, Juan had a question about the optional item.
Right.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, where would that fall in as far as the time? I mean, if the group decided, hey, yeah, we want that, when does that need to commence so that way you can finish whatever you need to do?
That's an excellent question, and that's what we're thinking about right now. And we are hoping to talk with the GSAs within the next week about this. So I don't have an answer for you yet, but we're working on it.
My thought is that it kind of falls within task 5, but it's more work.
Yeah.
So it'd be within that timeline likely.
Yeah.
In order to be able to incorporate the revisions into the draft, revised GSP, you're going to have all that work ahead of time.
So is that something you think you may have for Thursday, Liz, or?
No, I don't think so, but I think you can assume that it's going to be in parallel. Like Debbie said, task 5, you'll see the timeline is basically starting now until mid-June when we're going to have a draft. So that is like the entire extent of our working schedule before we have a draft for you. So that optional task will be in parallel with that. And I think the modeling team will want to start that as soon as the information can be made available. But I don't have an answer for you yet in terms of dates. Woodard and Kern is actually working on that this week. So I don't think I'm going to have that by Thursday either. I'm sorry. But within the next week, we'll have that.
Thank you, Liz. Any other questions? We have East Turlock here as well. Liz, or Sarah, go ahead.
Anyone in here have any questions?
No. I mean, I'd like to hear more about the recommendations for the optional modeling as well, but other than that, no questions.
Yeah, I think Ollie and Dominic are planning to respond to your questions about that.
Okay, so, that's fine.
Yeah, they're not here to chime in. Sorry.
Dominic is on the line
Oh, he is.
But I don't want to put him on the spot because I think they're probably still working on some of that.
Give us a preview.
Yeah, our goal overall is that we will be able to work through a lot of those details. I mean, we're still trying to put together an exact game plan for the modeling, specifically to answer your questions, Mike. I preface it with right now, I think we have two main goals to add clarity to DWR. One is the timeline and the level of detail of our projects. And the second one is to be able to answer, does the projects and management actions that we've currently outlined either in the previous version of the GSA or in any updates we've made since then, will those meet our sustainability goals? And I think we've taken a lot of steps. We've done extensive modeling to be able to show that that our existing projects do meet our sustainability goals. But since then, there's been a lot of additional detail. And I think one of the biggest questions we'll end up having is, as we continue to flesh out the details of these projects, do any of those details trigger a need to add those refinements into the model itself, or the tweaks, adjustments, and detail that we do provide, are they small enough that we will not need to go into that level of analytical evaluation, as opposed to something that, a numerical way to estimate their impacts without doing full-blown modeling. So it's a little bit more detailed than that, but maybe at a high level for everybody today, and then we're going to work out some of the details over the next few days and get it to the GSAs.
Dominic, this is Juan Ochoa, City Modesto. So that model, the optional, would it have more stringent thresholds for that model, or still the same, more extreme climate change or, atmospheric winters that we're seeing more often? I mean, what?
No, so the goal overall is we're still using the same projected conditions, the same climate conditions and hydrology that we have used in the past. The variables that would have the potential to trigger additional modeling would be if we want to add information related to particularly implementation period is one question I think we're trying to work through right now. Do we want to build that into a model simulation, effectively an on-ramping to those projects? And the second question would be, do we want to change any details about the projects themselves? Whether, as we've worked through the details of some of these projects, right now we know the locations of some projects have changed, the volume and the impacts of the volumes of water, whether it's a supply side project, whether it's land repurposing, right? The magnitude of the projects themselves have been changed over the past couple of years as we work through them. And so the question would be whether or not we want to incorporate those into a model run. But overall, what you're asking as far as what do I consider the base conditions, those will remain the same because DWR is not raising the bar for us to achieve our sustainability goals. We're using the same end mark. The question is, how do we get there?
Thanks, Dominic.
Thanks, Dominic.
Thank you, Dominic. Okay. Any other questions?
Liz, is that the end of your presentation?
I'm sorry?
That's the end of your presentation?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
No problem. So basically, thank you, Liz, that really helped me understand, one, what DWR's issues are, and two, how we plan to address them. And I appreciate you and Dominic and Sarah and Betty have really jumped on this so we don't lose a second, which is critical because 180 days is not very long. To get all this addressed and go through the process. So again, thank you so much for your work. So with that, we have a proposed action to approve the scope of work and funding for the consultant team led by Todd Groundwater to help us address those deficiencies in the GSP that were pointed out by DWR. And then obviously we'll develop some type of ad hoc group to work with Liz to make sure we stay on track and put the timeline and schedule up this is pretty much meeting nearly every week in some fashion to keep providing direction and keep working on an iterative process to get us to where we need to be to, meet the muster of DWR ultimately. So unfortunately, because I don't have a quorum still, we can't take action on this, but our board will be taking this up on Thursday to kind of move some of our budget around and fund the work. And again, that's the main issue. They're just going to ask, what does the TAC say? And my thought is the TAC is on board. We just couldn't take a formal vote. But Sarah, you do have an action on this item. And so I kind of turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, we do. And we discussed this with our full board a week ago, and they gave direction for this TAC to go ahead and move forward and approve the scope of work to get Todd and what we're currently moving forward with fixing the deficiencies, addressing the deficiencies. So if I could get a motion from somebody on the TAC.
Sarah, one quick question or comment. So we have one optional task on the table. I guess I would suggest that the TAC consider approving the scope of work subject to a separate authorization for the optional task, by the TAC or by the ad hoc group of the TAC. So that the contract is approved, but we do want to hear more about that optional model to make sure that we're in sync with what's being proposed.
Mike, sorry to interrupt. Would it be possible maybe to consider authorizing the contract with the option subject to that? That way it would enable the contracting, recognizing that the ad hoc or whatever we decide to do would have the authority to approve that, but we wouldn't have to go back to the boards and take additional actions to move that forward. I'm just concerned about the schedule.
Yeah, that was actually what I intended to convey. So sorry if that didn't come across clearly. I don't mean to make it more difficult. And
so we would be approving the scope of work with the option, with the caveat that the option would be reviewed by the ad hoc before moving forward on the modeling.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. Is ETS good with that? Okay, can I get a motion to that effect? Dennis, thank you very much. Second? There's only 2 people left. Thank you, Christy. All those in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries for ETS.
Wonderful, Sarah. Thank you. So again, I just encourage everybody to stay engaged on this issue. We're gonna need everybody's help to stay on track, get this done. We really need to get the GSP amended and approved. As we've seen in other parts of the San Joaquin Valley, it is no fun entering the state water board process. That's going to be not good for any of us or any of our leaders, our elected officials. So please work with us and Easterlock and Debbie and everybody else to make sure we work diligently to make the changes we need to make to get this GSP approved by DWR instead of the state water board process. So that's my exhortation to everybody.
And
okay.
If I could say something, we'll be updating the tax at our monthly meetings on where we are and all of that. And so even though there were specific TAC meetings where the technical team is envisioned to bring things to the TAC, we'll be updating everyone as the process unfolds.
Now, is this something that it can be cash flowed, or does each GSA have to, fork up their portion percentage for this work? How's that going to be?
So the two GSAs have a memorandum of understanding about how they work together to manage the subbasin, and part of that is a standardized cost share between the two, and so I believe it's envisioned that we use that standard cost share between the two GSAs to fund this project. And there is a joint account that we have used in the past to pay those invoices out of, and then we get the approvals. There's a standardized process we've been doing over time for that. And then for the West Turlock, and there'll be more information in the staff report that will be out shortly for the GSA meeting on Thursday. There are several projects in the current 23-24 fiscal budget that have not yet been authorized by the GSA or the tax to move forward, that can be postponed until next fiscal year. So it's my recommendation, I guess, that we reallocate those funds from our current budgeted tasks to this, that will then allow us to move forward with it quickly and not ask for additional funds from the member agencies, and meet the need, because it's an immediate need. It's not a need that's 6 months down the road. Yeah. So that's the recommendation. Some of it we did budget, some, but not the magnitude that the project will be, because we just didn't know what we need to do.
I mean, city does understand. I mean, this is not a caveat. It's not like, hey, an alternative. I mean, we know we have to do.
Sure. Well, and you haven't been engaged in these fiscal planning processes before with the GSA and the tax, and so that's kind of the process that, as far as the cost share, and so that's what we're recommending for West.
I just said this was unexpected, that make sure that we had the cash flow. That was my.
Yeah, we do have some money in the budget for this, for the West Turlock. And then there was money in the budget for a drinking water mitigation program, which is something that's a part of this. And so if you add those together, there's still about, let me look at the numbers, about $65,000 shortfall that we're going to have to find within the other projects. And so we're recommending that we postpone, what is it? The data management system project, the minimum threshold exceedance implementation project, the minimum threshold revisions, because we can't do that until after we get the approved GSP anyway, and interbasin coordination, and all of that adds up to a little over 65,000. So we would be able to accomplish it within the existing budget amounts. So what the individual agencies have already contributed. If that helps.
Okay, thanks everybody. So moving on to item number 7, our annual report, and Liz is going to give us an update on the water quality component of that annual report. Over to you again, Liz.
Hi again. I'm actually going to pass the baton to my colleague Arden, who did the water quality analysis. So just as a sort of introduction, Arden is a hydrogeologist here at Todd, and this water quality analysis is for the annual report that we're currently working on for water year 2023 that is due to the state by April 1st. So I'll hand it over to you, Arden.
Thank you, Liz. Let me get my screen shared real quick. Alrighty, can y'all see the slides well? Great, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you for the introduction, Liz. I'm aware that the water quality component of the annual report may not be on the top of everyone's mind right now, but I'll just start by sharing that we did not identify undesirable results this year related to water quality. So I'm going to walk through our draft water quality results for this year's annual report. And we follow the process each year that was defined in the GSP. And this is really our second year doing the water quality analysis. In water year 2021 annual report, we focused on developing the representative monitoring network for water quality and the baseline levels. And last year was our first one conducting this analysis. And this is the second year. So a reminder of what the analysis for the sustainability criteria for water quality was in the GSP first. So the MT is a new or first time exceedance of the maximum contaminant level in a potable supply well within the representative monitoring network. So each year we're looking at the water levels from the past water year and looking at, for the constituents of concern that we defined, if the concentrations are above the historical maximum, and also if it's a first time exceedance of the MCL. And then among those wells, undesirable results occur if the MT results in a well owner's increase on operational costs and if it's caused by GSA management activities. So what we mean by if the MT is caused by GSA management activities are specifically if the activities such as recharge related to GSA management activities is in some way causing concentrations of the constituents of concern to increase above the MCL for the first time, or if the MCL increases are related in some way to water levels getting below the water level sustainability criteria. So we established our baseline monitoring network in the water year 2021 annual report. And so this consisted of 345 wells that had concentrations for the constituents of concern measured in water year 2021. And we look at those same group of 345 wells each annual report. Not all of them are measured each year. It depends on what data are publicly available. But those are our monitoring network. And the constituents of concern that we're interested in are arsenic, nitrate, uranium, total dissolved solids, 1,2,3 TCP, and PCE. So when we did our baseline analysis, we identified the maximum concentrations in these 345 wells between water year 91 through water year 2021. And each year we compare the data in the past year to the historic levels for these baseline wells. So really this year we're looking at, in water year 2023, did the concentrations reach above what they were from 91 to water year 2022, because we include last year, and examine if they're a first-time exceedance of the MCL. So our process is we download the data from the Gamma database or GeoTracker, and then we compare the water year 2023 water quality data to the baseline to see if there's any new first-time MCL exceedances. And then if we do identify that, then we individually examine each of those wells that are a first-time exceedance to determine if they're increased concentrations that might be related to GSA management. So what we're really looking at there are, do we observe trends where the concentrations were increasing prior to GSP implementation? Or do we see, since implementation began, dips or significant changes in the water levels at nearby representative monitoring wells for water levels? And then we produced 6 different maps showing each of the constituents of concern. And we divide those by principal aquifer in each figure. So in water year 2023, 139 of the wells in that baseline monitoring network reported concentrations of the constituents of concern to publicly available databases. So 126 of those were municipal, 2 were domestic wells, and 11 were monitoring wells at regulated facilities. And I'll note that the definition of the MT and undesirable results only include public supply wells or potable wells, but we include the monitoring wells in our analyses just so we can kind of keep a sense of where water quality is in the basin or in the subbasin. And I'll also note that 206 of those 345 wells in the baseline monitoring network were not monitored for the constituents of concern in water year 2023. So many of these wells are not being measured every year. And so we cannot conduct the analysis for every well in the baseline wells. And then we did identify 4 wells that had a first-time MCL exceedance for nitrate and 2 wells that had a first-time exceedance for total dissolved solids. But when we individually looked at these wells, we did not identify that the concentration increase was related to GSA management activities or declining water levels nearby. So I'm first gonna walk you through real quick the maps of the constituents of concern that we did not identify first-time exceedances for. So this map shows the representative monitoring wells that were measured for arsenic during water year 2023. So there were 44 wells that were measured out of that baseline group. And in green, you can see the wells that had arsenic above the detection limit, but below the 10 micrograms per liter MCL. And then in yellow, those are the wells that were above the MCL, but this was not a first-time exceedance. And I'll note, especially for arsenic, often the wells that have higher concentrations are measured more frequently. So these maps do tend to sort of show the wells with higher concentration and may not be representative of the spatial distribution of arsenic in the basin. For uranium, only 12 wells in the representative monitoring well network were measured during water year 2023. None of those were in the western lower principal aquifer. And I'll also note on these maps, in the bottom left, we show what we call the western principal aquifers. And these are really the wells that either do not include construction information in the Gamma GeoTracker database, or they do contain data and they show that the wells are screened both in the upper and the lower western aquifers. For TCP, we see that TCP was measured in 44 representative monitoring wells during the past water year, and none of these wells reported first-time MCL exceedances. Here you can also see the yellow dots are showing wells that are above the MCL, but it's not a first-time exceedance above the MCL. And this kind of shows the disproportionate number of wells with higher concentrations that are regularly monitored, which is why these maps do tend to appear a bit skewed towards higher concentrations. And then for PCE, only 5 wells in the monitoring network were measured and reported to the public databases. And once again, none of these wells reported first-time MCL exceedances. So now we will get into nitrate. There were 126 wells that were measured in water year 2023 for nitrate, and 4 of those reported first-time MCL exceedances. So 3 of them were public supply wells in the Western Principal Aquifers, and which means that we either didn't have data publicly available, or they were screened in both aquifers. And then 1 well was a public supply well in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer. So I'm gonna, oh yes.
Sorry, can you describe, we see this on a very small screen. Can you describe what the different colors mean? Because that'll make it a lot easier to understand. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yes, thank you. That's a great question in addition. And the red dots are wells that are above the MCL with a first-time exceedance. The yellow dots are above the MCL, but it's not a first-time exceedance. The green dots are below the MCL, but above the detection limit. And then the black dots are ones where the concentrations were so low that they were below the detection limit. And I'm going to be zooming in on the wells that have the big circles around them.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions before I dive into the individual wells? Alrighty. So the first well we're going to take a closer look at is a public supply well north of Turlock. And when we look at the time concentration map, we do see that the nitrate concentrations have been increasing prior to GSA or GSP implementation. And so we do not link this to GSA management activities because the concentrations were going up prior to Sigma implementation. The next well is a public supply well north of Hillmar. We were not able to find construction information for this well. We do see that the nitrate concentrations in this past water year did peak, and that was in May and July of 2023. This well was measured for nitrate 30 times in the past year, and 5 of those measurements had a concentration greater than 10 milligrams per liter of nitrate as nitrogen. And so the closest water level representative monitoring well is TID 199A. That's about 1.5 miles north of the well. And as you can see in the hydrograph here, in water year 2023, the water level was above the water level MT, and there's not a declining trend that was observed. This well is also near TID 113A, which is 1.7 miles southwest of this well. And once again, the water levels are above the MT, and there's not a declining trend that's observed. And because we don't have the information for this well, we are not sure if it's upper or lower aquifers, but there are not nearby lower Western Principal Aquifer monitoring wells near this well. So we could not sufficiently evaluate its water levels in the lower Principal Aquifer. However, based off of the data that we do have, we do not believe that the elevated nitrate concentrations are linked to groundwater management. So the last 2 wells with elevated nitrate with a first-time exceedance in this past water year are 2 wells that are along the Merced River. They are part of the Merced River Resort. And we know that 1 well is a shallow well. The other does not have construction data publicly available. And we don't personally have information for that well, but because they're right along the river and in the same facility, we do believe it's very likely that this is a shallow well. So we used the Western Upper Principal Aquifer monitoring wells to evaluate both of these wells. So the time concentration plot here shows that there's a little bit of seasonality that we observe with the nitrate concentrations. We see these sort of local peaks each winter. And then this past year, we observed on March 2nd, the concentrations were greater than the 10 milligrams per liter MCL. But then on March 28th, the concentrations were non-detect, beneath the detection limit for both of these wells. And so this well does, the historical concentrations suggest that there's variability that may be linked to river fluctuations, keeping in mind that there's a strong seasonality and both of these wells are right along the river. So once again, we do not believe that these are linked to GSA groundwater management activities. Are there any questions for the nitrate wells? All right, now I will move on to TDS. So total dissolved solids were measured in 26 of the representative monitoring wells for water quality during water year 2023. And we observed 2 municipal wells that reported first-time MCL exceedances. And both of these are categorized as in the Western Principal Aquifers. And I'll walk you through those 2. The first one is a public supply well in Ceres. And we did not have the public screened intervals available on Gamma, but within our database, we were able to take a closer look at the construction information for this well and confirm that this is in the lower Principal Aquifer. And this well is very close to our Smyrna Park for 223 water level representative sigma well. And so when we look at the TDS concentrations over time, we see that in October 2022, there was a peak above the 500 milligrams per liter MCL, or the secondary MCL for TDS. The other well, we're also going to use the Smyrna Park hydrograph to compare it to. So I'll introduce its water levels over time, or I'm sorry, its concentrations over time first. And this is also a public supply well. It's southeast of Ceres in the Western Principal Aquifers. But when we also look at it, construction in our database, we see that it's screened beneath the Corcoran clay and in the lower Principal Aquifer. And this well had a TDS peak reported in January 2023 that was above that secondary MCL for total dissolved solids. So both of these wells, the closest lower Principal Aquifer monitoring well for water levels is the Smyrna Park well. And when we look at the hydrograph for this well, we do not see a long-term declining trend, and all of the water levels since GSP implementation have been above the MT. So for these wells, we do not believe that the increases in the TDS concentration are linked to GSA management activities. So with that, I'd like to see if y'all have any questions about the water quality analysis.
Any questions for Arden, our part of the world? So look at here, Arden, anybody in Cortez?
Anyone? No, pretty quiet over here.
Okay. Well, thanks, Arden. Really appreciate your hard work on that. And that is our good news for the day. So
yeah,
well done bringing us good news.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 8. We have them, so Sigma related updates. Debbie, now really, you know, the main news is our finding from DWR and our work to get us back into compliance with that. Any Sigma updates from the East Turlock folks?
Well, we had a workshop and interviews this morning with 3 different vendors for established pumping management portals in the San Joaquin Valley. That was very informative. It's going to help inform a procurement process where we're hoping to bring somebody on to build our full-scale portal starting it after the end of March. So our selection would be, contracting would be finalized in near the end of March. And then we plan to build our GSA-wide portal so that we're ready to roll it out during summer, hopefully during June. And then 2024 will be kind of like a dry run for us. And then 2025, we hope to have pumping fees implemented at that point. So stand by for more information on that. We also continue to make progress in terms of contracting and planning for our MLRP work. And we've got a field trip coming up with Speaker Rivas to Merced County and near the end of the month. So Debbie, I know you and I, Michael, talked about, you know, if TID perhaps wants to have somebody participate or present at that meeting, they would be welcome to come. It's going to be a quick trip. We have 15 minutes to tell them about our approach and convince them that's what the state should be supporting. So wish us luck.
The speaker is a busy man, Mike, you know that. But I'm glad he's making his way out here. That is good. And he's from, I think he's from the Salinas area, so he understands, you know, the type of environment we live in. So that's encouraging.
Well, and frankly, if we can't make a good case for it in 15 minutes, then we probably never will be able to. So I'm happy for the opportunity to get the word out. I mean, I think we've got a good approach.
Thank you, Mike. Anything else from the east side? I did have one thing I forgot about when Michael asked me. Okay, so March, I believe, is the time that we're allotted to do spring water level measurements, if I recall correctly. So we're going to be coordinating between the GSAs to determine the timing for that. We usually try to have a 2-week period when each of the individual agencies that take the water level measurements do that and then provide it to their designated person where we compile it all. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that that will be happening again. So please, you know, put time in your schedule to do that, and then we'll be reaching out.
Sounds good, Debbie. Thank you. Any other updates from the group? Okay, hearing none, our next regular meeting with the Joint Technical Advisory Committee is scheduled for Tuesday, March 12th, 2 o'clock. So hopefully get everybody there, and at that time I have some update on our progress in working on the TSP, get it in conformance or compliance. Okay, so we don't need to adjourn on the West Turlock because we never convened. Sarah, would you like to adjourn on your side?
Yes, we are ready to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Dennis, thank you. Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.